Hi, Julie. Welcome to the show.
Hi,
Coming
Annie.
and going. Hi. The show is coming and going, cross-cultural conversations. So last time we chatted, you were mentioning how you were an immigrant at a young age. Can you give a brief introduction of how your parents arrived in the US for the audience, please?
Yeah, so my parents and I came to the US from Vietnam as boat people. So at the time, I was a 2-month-old baby, and this was in 1979. So this is escaping communist Vietnam.
Wow, that sounds intense. So I wanted to hear a little bit about your experience growing up from such a young age too, right? So you mentioned that you grew up at a time when assimilation was big in the US. How did that play out in your childhood, especially growing up in Bellevue?
So so actually we didn't move to Bellevue until I was in sixth grade. So how it played out was until I entered kindergarten, I spoke Vietnamese at home. And then I remember going to register for kindergarten and my parents turning to me and saying, okay, now we need to give you an American name.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, oh, and then they said, what about Julie? And my parents had studied French in Vietnam. And so Julie is Julie, right? It's a French name. And so that's how I had the name Julie. And actually I didn't start thinking or even using my Vietnamese name until I started studying Vietnamese and was getting ready to go to Vietnam, and that's when I discovered that my Vietnamese name was Hoài Hương. So my parents would call me Hương sometimes, but Hoài Hương actually means to remember one's homeland.
Oh,
And so
that's
that's
so
a
cute.
Sino-Vietnamese word, and so it makes a lot of sense since my parents were the first in our family, to escape Vietnam, and my parents knew that they were not going to go back to Vietnam. And yes, so that's the story. That was definitely, I think, the something that nowadays I see a lot of people actually keeping their Asian names, and it's actually cool to be able to speak multiple languages. And yet back then it was all about, hey, you got to study English, you got to be perfect in English. And so once I entered grade school, I didn't speak Vietnamese anymore. And my parents were also working all the time. My parents founded the first privately owned Vietnamese language newspaper in the Pacific Northwest, and so I was a total latchkey kid. Again, that is something about that era, and then
What does it
I
mean to be a latchkey kid?
a latchkey kid means that when you come home, no one's waiting for you. Your parents aren't waiting for you, and so you have a key around your neck,
Oh,
and
wow.
you let yourself in. And so actually from a very young age, I took care of myself and took care of my two younger brothers, and that was completely normal. And that was I definitely think of myself as a Generation Xer. Yeah, and so there's I think when we it's so easy to criticize, oh, why didn't your parents teach you this, or why did you take on an American name? She's like, well, kind of a product of the era that we grew up in too. So mhm.
You had just said you were a latchkey kid. You entered um, elementary and then didn't speak Vietnamese at home. So did you completely lose your Vietnamese? Do you still speak a little bit of it?
Well, so now I speak Vietnamese, but that's because I actually made a conscious effort to study. And so once I graduated from college, and I was going to go on and pursue my master's and PhD in Southeast Asian history. And it's like, okay, I better learn a language here. And so I actually went to Madison, Wisconsin the summer after I graduated from college, and they have a special Southeast Asian language boot camp there. It's a
Oh,
8-week program, 4 hours a day, and there's all of the people can study Burmese, Khmer, Vietnamese, Thai, all the different Southeast Asian languages. And so that's actually where I started to study Vietnamese. I had taken a bit of it in college, but it was really, I think, the biggest progress I made was in that camp. So I actually started studying Vietnamese intensely in Madison, Wisconsin.
wow.
Um,
That's a very interesting location.
yeah, yeah, and then after that I did my first year of I did my master's program, and then I took a gap year between my master's and my PhD, and I lived in Vietnam, and I did another intense language program over the summer to kind of kickstart that year, because I knew I wanted to spend that year in just language immersion. And I lived in Hanoi, and then that was another period of deep, intense study. And so I learned to read and write Vietnamese as an adult.
Oh, wow. That is actually really cool because I totally relate to that. So I guess briefly about myself, I grew up in Taiwan and went to international school. But before that, I had actually started school, kindergarten in the States. So I felt like, as you were saying, when you entered kindergarten, your parents kind of stopped speaking Vietnamese to you. That was very similar in my aspect, where I started kindergarten and kind of lost a lot of my Chinese, and then went through a phase of not wanting to be Asian at all because I grew up in Eastern Washington and it was completely white here, right? Did you ever go through a phase where you also didn't want to have anything to do with Asia, or was it a lot better where you were, I guess, in Seattle?
Yes, even though what was interesting, it wasn't necessarily actually because I was surrounded by white people. It was because actually the schools I went to in Seattle and even on the east side were pretty diverse. But there was a period was like, oh, I want to wear colored contact lenses and have like lighten my hair. And so I think that there was definitely this sense of, oh, white is better looking. And yeah, and so I did go through that phase.
Did I mean, did anything happen to make you grow out of that, or like what initially prompted you to start learning Vietnamese again?
Quite honestly, it was a very strategic decision. So then I went to Berkeley for my undergraduate, and Berkeley has a very high Asian population. I think it's something like, I don't know, maybe like 40 or 50% Asian. Um and and then I became really good at history, and I really got interested in history, and I needed to do graduate work. I would need to, one of the things that could set me apart is by knowing another language. And so Vietnamese was going to be the easiest to do that. And also, I mean, I think at Berkeley, that's where I developed a lot of pride around being Vietnamese, even though I had it definitely growing up. It was just there was there were these Asian student associations, and definitely there was the Vietnamese ones, and the all of the different groups. So that really helped too.
Wow, so I guess those groups are there for a reason, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
And did they really worked on you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I had Vietnamese. My best friend in high school was also Vietnamese, and then just meeting more Vietnamese in school was also just, and then yeah, those were the things that just really getting more into my Vietnamese culture.
Wow, that thank you for sharing that. Because I feel like I also went through something similar when I arrived from Taiwan at an international school to the US for college, and was like, wait, there's Asians here. And it really did also make me feel some pride. And that's also when I wanted to brush up on my Chinese. And I also learned Chinese as an adult. Um, Actually, do you think having gone through that, like what would you say for other people who are going through kind of an identity crisis, and want to reconnect with their, I guess, their Asianness,
Mhm.
whatever flavor of Asian that looks like? Um, yeah, what are your thoughts on that, and like any advice you have for people who are going through something we both went through?
Well, I think that it's never too late to learn a language. I'll say that. And I have a lot of empathy actually in studying Vietnamese. I really learned how difficult it must have been for my parents to study English. And I think it was,
Yes. Am I back?
you were back. You just froze for a little bit. So I can start that again. So I think it was, oh, I was giving advice on others who want to get connected with their culture.
Yeah,
Right.
as
Okay.
an adult.
Yeah. So I think it's never too late to study another language. it will be harder the older we get, and yet it's never too late. And it actually, when studying Vietnamese, it gave me a lot of empathy for my parents and understanding how they had to study English and navigate this whole new world when they came to the US. So even though my dad spoke English in Vietnam as part of the South Vietnamese military, there's definitely a whole new level of fluency that was required by living here. And it actually transformed our relationship too. I became fluent by the time I was 22 because I was so immersed in it. And and then I started to speak to my parents completely in Vietnamese, and it
Oh,
really
wow.
changed our relationship. And I think now it's like, wow, it's amazing that I spent my first half of my life speaking to them in English. And so my Vietnamese is, I'd say that the breadth of my vocabulary is not as wide as my parents. I can't talk about mortgages and taxes and things like that, but I can talk about emotions. I have a deeper nuance of the language. And so yeah, and I think it was transformational. So I think for anyone who is considering it, you don't have to be literate in it and read and write. And yet, if there is an interest, there are programs, and I think that it's actually even more possible now than ever with technology and all of these special apps versus when I was growing up.
So you mentioned that you had a deeper vocabulary in emotions. Was that by choice, or was that I guess, the programs that you went into?
I mean, it was partly the academic studies that I did. So once because I started to read and write and be literate in Vietnamese. And so
Hmm.
just as I was analyzing Vietnamese, it was just I'd be looking at it for those shades of what does this person mean? And so that's where I would really start to, that's how my vocabulary increased quite quickly.
Oh, that's cool. I definitely will make a mental note of that for me studying
Mhm,
Chinese.
mhm, mhm.
I'm going to actually pivot us a little bit. So you had mentioned that by sixth grade you moved to Bellevue. Um, can you? I mean, I think of Bellevue now as like the place where there's a lot of Asians. Was it also like that when you were growing up? And I think you had also mentioned a little bit about, like, you moved to Bellevue. There were, I don't know how many, like some more Asians than you were familiar with. And then you had noticed that there were kind of different, I don't know, Asians from different countries, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
What did you observe once you moved there as well?
And so I was coming from the Seattle School District to the Bellevue School District, and Seattle School District also has a really big Asian population. And so coming to Bellevue, it was more of Asian and white versus in Seattle, it's just a lot of different groups. um, and so and so I think maybe back then I'm not quite sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was something like 20 or 25% Asian. And now I think actually Newport High School, which is where I went to high school, is, I heard, majority Asian.
Oh my
So
gosh.
so I mean, all of the different ethnicities, it was just something, uh being Asian American. I think growing up in on the West Coast, I have a very different experience than if I'd grown up in the Midwest, or if I'd grown up in, or even Eastern Washington. So yeah, so I had a very strong sense of belonging and pride. I didn't really, there was this, oh, white is prettier, but that didn't that but there's still a sense of our Asian culture though.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, I definitely, I guess, growing up in Eastern Washington, or like in my like childhood head, I think I was here from like kindergarten, like early elementary. So like I think I had left by like the time I was in third grade. And I just remember it was very, very white. And therefore it wasn't just like being white was prettier. It was like, oh, like I better act white because that's what everyone else is doing. So that's an interesting observation. Can you, I guess, we had also talked about like the different Asian cultures, and you had noticed the subtle differences. Do you have a concrete example, and like what was the most interesting as you moved from, I guess, a, a more diverse set to Asian and white?
Just so when I got to college, Koreans like, I remember this tables. It was like, oh, Koreans are really Christian. And I didn't know that. Like, because a lot of the tables and a lot of the Korean, and I began to just meet more Korean Americans when I was in college. And so, and even just like later on, I realized, oh, the Vietnamese I grew up with, or the ones that my family is friends with, are Vietnamese Catholics, which are actually different from Vietnamese Buddhists. And even understanding, meeting more different kinds of South Asians. Oh, because the South Asians I knew, the Indians I knew ate meat, and yet a lot of Indians don't eat meat. And I didn't realize
Oh,
that until later on in life. And so, yeah, so there's definitely, and because of the different regions that they come from, it's like, oh, that there's even differences within within national identity too. And that,
did
I
you?
think that's something that I continue to learn. I mean, just last night I was at an event where it was mostly, it was people who are of South Asian heritage who grew up in Africa.
Oh,
And so for
wow.
generations. And so, and one person was like, yeah, my mom and my grandmother were born in Kenya. I was born in Uganda, and we're African. And so it's, and so it's, even though they have these names that you would associate with South Asian, like, and also Muslim names as well. So yeah, so those are, it's interesting, all of the different nuances that I continue to learn.
Wait, hold on. Okay, but that seems very, very cool. So, okay, so you met people who had grown up in Africa as Asians. Did you guys share experiences where they, I guess, what did they say about growing up Asian
Oh, I
in
mean,
Africa?
so we didn't talk so much about that, but it's I mean, but they see themselves as Africans. I mean, they say this, that they've been in the continent, they've been in the continent for generations. So I mean, it's interesting because what I haven't asked is, well, would you consider yourself African American? Because it's, and then it's just like, because no one, I think anyone who's African American would be like, you're not African American the way that I'm
Right,
African
right.
American, right? Though technically, you, when your parents were recent generations, were born in Africa, in different, like, and I knew of South Asians who grew up in Africa. And yeah, I feel like I've in different countries, like Uganda, Tanzania, like Kenya, and uh and it's, I mean, it's just another diaspora. There are, like, the Chinese diaspora is huge too. Like, there are Chinese everywhere.
Actually, yes, there is a book. I listened to the audiobook format, but it's called Have You Eaten Yet?
Yes, I read that too. Yeah, it
Oh,
was
yeah, what
great.
did you think of it? I thought for me,
Yeah.
I learned so much because
Yeah,
I
it was great. It was
it's
great.
about Asian.
Let me see. Oh, like, oh, in Israel and Brazil. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was great to see.
I think
Um,
my favorite was actually the one in Africa where they were like, yeah, these people got shipwrecked and
mhm,
now there's a Chinese community in Africa. And I was like, wait, what? Like,
mhm,
this is so cool.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, so on that note, is there any like Vietnamese food that you absolutely love? And like, is that, I mean, I'm assuming because it's also Asian that it's also a love language of like, have you eaten yet? Like,
Mhm.
is there like a specific type of food that your family likes to share with the rest of the world when people come over?
Well, so I'll just say, growing up, my parents were busy at work, and so there were, we pretty much had, coming home, latchkey kid, we had three options. It was caramelized. Was a Vietnamese dish. It was caramelized pork with eggs, and it kept well, refrigerated well, right? And then there was Costco pizza, and there was spaghetti, and we had one of those three options. And then on special occasions, we would have egg rolls. And so I actually didn't really experience Vietnamese food until I lived in Vietnam. The variety, the range of it. I mean, and so compared to a lot of my Vietnamese American friends who grew up with elaborate Vietnamese dishes, it was all new to me. And so, interestingly enough, I actually learned how to cook a lot of it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I learned how to cook quite by accident. Actually, a friend who was working, or who was volunteering for a nonprofit, asked me to donate a Vietnamese meal for for a gala to raise money.
And I'm back.
Okay, no worries. Okay, it's still recording, so we're good. So I'll start my story again. My So I actually learned how to cook Vietnamese food because I had a friend who was volunteering for a nonprofit, and she wanted to raise money at their gala. And so she asked if I would donate a Vietnamese meal. And I said, okay. And then she was like, well, what should we put on the menu? And so I kind of named some of my favorite dishes. And they had a well-known local TV anchor as the MC, and we ended up raising something like $1,800
Oh my
across two
gosh,
dinners. And
that's amazing.
and I had about a month to basically learn how to cook Vietnamese food. And so
So what
I watched a lot of YouTube videos to learn how to make these dishes.
what did you end up making?
I ended up making there's something called bánh cuốn, which is I compared to it's like Vietnamese ravioli. That was actually the hardest one. That was so hard. And now I just cheat and buy it at the deli. But I tried like I don't know 8 different times. It was so hard to make that one. Caramelized catfish, which is one of my favorite dishes. And then I ended up learning how to make my version of Vietnamese spring rolls, fresh spring rolls. And so I do that kind of Northwest style with a bunch of Vietnamese herbs and salmon and mango and some fried onions, rather than the traditional one you've probably seen as shrimp
Mm-hmm.
with rice noodles and some lettuce. And so I don't really I think that one's it's okay. So yes. Mhm.
Do you so okay, so first of all, I want to talk about the ravioli. What's in it and why is it so difficult to make?
It's uh it's pork, it's ground pork with wood ear mushrooms
Okay.
and onions. The filling is easy. The hard part is the shell is super thin. It's steamed rice paper. And so normally the way that they do it is you would actually imagine a big pot of water, and they have a muslin sheet on top, and then you pour the batter, and then you have to whip it off very quickly um uh with a special tool. I can't remember what it's
Oh
called
wow.
right now. And ideally it's very thin. And so that's what
Oh,
makes it hard, because it's just been steamed, and it's got to
wait.
be super thin. And so I even got the special tool for it, and yet that really didn't help. And I found a way to kind of cheat with it using a nonstick pan. It's still thicker than it should be, because it it's really good when when the rice flour part is very thin. And they have a version of it in Chinese dim sum that I've had.
Oh,
Right,
right. Okay, I think I
but
know what
that's
you're
very
talking
thick
about.
still too. Like
Yeah,
this
with
one is it's so thin that you can see the stuffing through it. It's kind of translucent.
I think I know what you're talking about. There's like a Vietnamese place in Chinatown, and I don't remember the name of it. Um, but I think I've had something like that. Do you put like fish sauce over it?
You put fish sauce, and usually they have it with some ham too, some Vietnamese ham.
Is it like super long and you cut it up?
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Oh, okay. So
So I
I think
mean,
I know what
it's
you're
not
talking about.
super long, but like you can. So it kind of there are different ways of making it, but like it's usually about this long by the time
Okay.
you have it. Mhm.
Okay. And I totally know what you're talking about. The one in dim sum has like shrimp in it and you pour like soy sauce over
Yeah,
it,
yeah, but
right?
even that one is pretty thick
Yeah.
compared to this one, which is it's translucent. You can see the stuffing through it.
Yeah, the consistency is different.
Mhm.
Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to ask you about is your spring rolls. Like, how did you come up with the idea to put salmon in it? And when you do it, do you lay it out and make your own spring rolls, or is it more like you wrap it up for everyone?
So I've done it both ways. So I've actually had parties where it's like come and learn how to make spring rolls. And so it's a nice little party trick for people to learn how to do that. And I've also done it where it's just like I'll just make them all because it's the group is small enough, and I'll do it. And so it kind of really depends on the timing and the occasion. So, and then I think in terms of I can't remember exactly how I got to that. But I mean, the thing about spring rolls is you can put anything in them. You can put tofu in them, you can put bell peppers in them. They're really just this vehicle for all of these different ingredients. And um, and so it's just, oh well, let me try this. And yeah. I mean, it was,
And you found the winner for you.
yeah, I found the winner. I actually even created a little Instagram reel that's gotten thousands of views on it because of that. So
Wow.
I'll send that to you. So
Yes, please do. That is so cool. Yeah, I'm actually really curious because we make spring rolls, Vietnamese spring rolls at home too, from because my relatives spent some time in Vietnam, and it's one of my favorite dishes because
mhm,
it's always like you choose your own adventure, right? Like
mhm,
all the dishes are out, you get to put whatever you want in it, you
mhm.
want however much you want and how many you want. So it's always like a really fun thing to gather people and just like make food.
Yeah, and I mean, I can give you tips on what I think are the best wrappers and like and
Please
the ones
do.
and also I think a lot of people will put it in warm water. I actually like to use just room temperature water because
Oh,
it is easier. It will eventually soften,
okay.
but it's actually easier to it gives you more time to put in this the filling.
I will keep that in mind. I think
Mhm.
we use a little bit warmer water, and yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes it like bunches together, and you're
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
no.
It's especially if you're kind of starting, you feel like you might need a little more time to figure out all the toppings to all the
Hmm.
fillings. Mhm,
Cool. I'm gonna pivot us again.
mhm.
So, actually, I would like to hear if you could share a phrase in Vietnamese.
Mhm,
What would you say? Well, I want to hear you say it,
mhm.
and then I want to ask you what you said and why you said it.
Okay, so my favorite Vietnamese, I think that this is such it's a word that I feel is so, it kind of embodies a, a kind of a Vietnamese sensibility, and it's mua hơ. And what it means is I bought something and I was satisfied with what I bought until I found out someone got it for cheaper. And now I'm kind of regretful.
Wow. Okay. So I guess that begs the question of how you learned that phrase and why did you choose it?
I just feel like I mean, it's just such a Vietnamese sensibility. I'm just like, wow, like I was okay with it, but then someone else got it for it. Like, because there is a sense of like this kind of negotiating spirit, that bargaining spirit, which I don't actually like to bargain. Yet the first time I lived in Vietnam, I really learned how to, and I got really good at it. And I had to because I didn't have any money. so so I actually really did have to. I had a very limited budget. And so I think I learned it from from my teacher. And it was like, oh, that just really just captures this so much in just in a verb, and it kind of it's um what I like about it is it's so uniquely Vietnamese. And there are probably other cultures I'm sure that have something like that. Yeah, but it's not just like this translation.
Yeah, yeah, you said one word and the
It
translation
means
was
so
a
much,
phrase, right? That was
right?
so cool.
And then I mean, like, there's also just like a lot of different words for rain, which I'm not going to remember all of the different words, but because they have lots of different kinds of rain, and also different words for love too. Like the word that you use for romantic love would be different from the word that you would use um, for familial love.
Wow, that's really cool that there's different nuances for love and for rain, right? Like
Yeah.
that's really interesting that they have different terms for
Well,
it.
and then you think about it, it's just the word in English is we love everything. We love food. I love, and we kind of throw that word around, and there it's no, um there's a more of this value to it, actually, I would say. Kind of no, you don't the way that you love egg rolls is not the way that you love someone who's your romantic partner versus um your your family. You wouldn't use the word love. You would just say, I like it.
I like that. I like that there's like a different sense of love for everything, right? Like, yeah, I agree. Like in English, we say like, oh, I loved getting to know you, right? Or
Mhm,
I love, I don't know, insert some food, right? Like it's
mhm,
Thanksgiving. I love turkey, right?
mhm,
Um, actually, so I actually wanted to go back a little bit. You had mentioned that you got really good at negotiating. I
mhm.
also am horrible at haggling. What tips do you have?
Well, I mean, I got good because I was just very blunt about it. And what I would do is I would go around, I'd ask, okay, how much are you charging? Then I'd go around, I'd ask other vendors, and then I'd go back to the first vendor. I'm like, this is the price I want. Because I basically find out. And I mean, later on, when I actually had more resources, I really didn't negotiate because it's actually exhausting, and I don't do it for sport. I have some friends who actually do it for sport. I truly did it out of necessity. And so once I didn't have to do it anymore, I'm like, I'm not going to do this because I actually don't like that feeling.
Did you find, I mean, I guess I don't know how much Vietnamese you knew before you went, but like, did you find that as you got more proficient and more able to converse when you were there, that like the price at the beginning just went down? Like, so like, for example, when I went to Southeast Asia, I found it really interesting that they would bring like a calculator and they would punch in the numbers.
Mhm.
But then like, of course they're gonna say something in the local language and I wouldn't understand and I would like look dumbfounded. And then the number immediately went up after they found that I wasn't a local. So I wonder, like, as you were able to communicate more, did they just like start at a lower price already?
I mean, it's that's an interesting question because I mean, I like for it was a very long time before I could pass before my Vietnamese could pass, right? And when it passed, the best it was like, oh, you're from a different region. Like when I was in Hanoi, you're from
Oh.
Saigon. When I was in Saigon, you're from Hanoi. So, and so I think it was. I mean, there was always this inflation. And I think that that's just like what's to be expected. Actually, I have a funny story about foreigner pricing and Vietnamese pricing. So I lived in this house with my best friend who's also Vietnamese American, and all of her roommates before that had been non-speaking foreigners who are not Vietnamese of Vietnamese heritage. And so, and the way, and it's very clear that they have different pricing. Like there's foreigner pricing, and then there's Vietnamese pricing. That's legal, that's known. And so the way they collect bills is they go to they every month they go to you, they knock on your door and they hand you the bill and you pay right then and there, and you pay in cash. And so
Wow.
they're literally bill collectors. And so the bill for foreigners, I remember, I think this was like the water bill or something. It's a big sheet of paper. And so then the bill collector came and she gave me this bill. I was like, okay. And then she gave me another bill. I'm like, what's this for? This is water too. I've already paid my water bill. And she's like, oh, well, I don't know. I have to find out. And so then I asked her how our housekeeper, our Vietnamese housekeeper, can you go investigate this? Because I'm not paying two water bills. I'm fine with paying my bigger price, right? Because I am a foreigner. And so what she found out was that the head of the ward, who lived just a few houses down, had been sending her water bill to the foreigner's house for years.
What?
Yeah. And no one picked it up because the foreigners who lived there were just like, whatever, I'll just pay the bill, right? And it was like maybe $20 or something like that, you know. And so uh, and so
Wow.
this is
Wait,
the different.
wait, but they never caught on that there were two bills?
No, they just paid
Wow.
it like just like the bill came, they paid for it. And but because I could read Vietnamese, because I could speak Vietnamese, and I mean, my roommate was always working, so she was never the one paying the bills. It was always her roommates. And so that's when I was like, what is this? No, I'm not paying this. No, you got to go investigate this. And that's when they found out that this had been happening for years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, this is, I mean, you know, like the level of corruption is what I realized. I mean, that talk about like kind of cross cultural experiences was I really took for granted this idea like innocent until proven guilty. And I think my parents, when I first told them I was going back to Vietnam, they were just really worried because they were just, oh, you know, you're the sweet Seattle girl and it's really tough there. And I didn't realize what they meant until I lived there because there it's this, oh, people are going to cheat you. Like, and it's up to you to figure that out, like to prevent that. So, and like corruption is just, it's just like it's every day. So, and I would have then Vietnamese friends who are like, oh no, like it's up to you to make sure that people aren't doing that to you.
Oh,
Otherwise, you're naive.
yeah, that's a really interesting thought process because yeah, I feel like in the US it's a lot of like you're innocent until you're proven guilty, right?
Yeah.
So did your time spent in Vietnam change the way that you thought about people after you came back to the US, or do you still usually go by the
I think what really helped me understand is how dynamic things are and how things change. And I don't want to say Vietnam was bad and the US was good. There are all these different, I mean, it's something that I really appreciate about in Vietnam is traffic accidents are actually, it's all about looking at what's in front of you and trusting that people behind you are also doing that. So it's very defensive. Whereas in the US, I think it's much more by the law. Like, oh, there are all of these laws that you're supposed to do, and you trust that people are following the rules. Whereas in Vietnam, it's more like, no, you just got to see, you got to constantly be aware of what's in front of you. So, and trust that others are also doing that. And then if there's an accident, it's always the person responsible for paying is the person with the more expensive vehicle.
Oh, interesting. So it's not
So
even
that
who's at
happened to
fault.
me it's not about who that happened to me. I like a 12-year-old kid totally ran into my motorbike, totally his fault. He was not paying attention. Yeah, because he was on a bicycle and I was on a motorbike, I was paying. And it's just a really different philosophy. And so, yeah, I think that there are different expectations that aren't actually written down. It's just like you just
Yeah, it's like the rules that you find out once you land,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Yeah, I remember visiting Vietnam, and I was just appalled by people running lights, and my friends were like, no, it's okay, it just works.
Yeah, there's kind of this rhythm. And also, I mean, when I first started living there, this was in 2002, that people would just honk the horn as a way of driving and like honk, 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 honk. And then they actually slowly over time said, no, you should really honk when you need to honk, because it would create this huge noise pollution all the time. It's just like honking all the time. And people did actually learn how to do that. And they actually learned also how to stop more. It got a lot better, because it used to be traffic would be like because no one stopped. So then we're like, okay, this is actually more efficient if people stop, and then you let these cars go. So their training actually did happen over the past, I would say, 15 years to reset some of those behaviors. It's not anything like in the US, and yeah, it's definitely changed.
Wow, that's cool that you could see like from your very beginning, and then as you've gone back, it's like snapshots of like where they progressed in following the rules and everything. Cool. Well, it looks like we're almost at time, and I want to wrap up. So I'm going to leave with one last question. What are three pieces of advice you would give to someone who is immigrating, possibly with young kids, based on your own experience?
Mm-hmm. Immigrating to the US, you mean?
Yes, immigrating to the US.
So that there are lots of resources available. Actually, the library. Go to the library. I think that they will. That is a really great place for you to get help and to also connect with community too. And I think also find groups that you can connect with. Maybe that's like volunteering. I think that or just different neighborhood communities. I think it's really important to get friends, to build friendships. So and then the third is to, and I think this is anywhere, it's just like you gotta keep talking. And people might feel like, oh, I don't understand you. It's just like you just got to keep. I mean, that's what I did with Vietnamese. It's like, just well, I'm going to keep speaking in Vietnamese because eventually I'm going to get better. So to not hide that. That's for those, I guess, who don't come to the US with that language.
Wow, those are good pieces of advice. I like did not think about the library, but yes, the library is a very good resource, and they also have free tickets.
Yeah,
I don't
free
know if you
tickets, free internet. Like there's lots of things that you can get at the library. And I mean, it's a very special thing that the US actually invests so much on libraries.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a resource I have come to love as well.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Julie.
Annie, thank you so much.